be why I couldn't do a background.
I'm recording right now.
I am also recording. We
Okay,
got this.
here we go.
got
All right.
this.
So welcome back to the Contrarians. We've actually got a special episode for you today. And I thought this was, this is a good idea in terms of explaining a little bit more about the show, because we've often got people asking, oh, do this band, do this band, do this band. And there's always, one or two or three reasons why we can't do that band. But the main reason is we have to keep the integrity of the concept of us knowing these bands and truly in our hearts having a contrarian view of what that band's best album is. So on that front, what we've come up for you today is an episode that we're going to be calling 5 Bands You Won't See on the Contrarians ... on the Contrarians. And the reason you won't see these bands is because the 3 of us, 4 of us in some respects, we've got other folks involved with the show, but for today, the idea is that the 3 of us kind of agree with the sober view of what this band's favorite album is, and B, in almost every case here, it's pretty undisputed that there's a single sober view of what that album is. So we can't do an episode of the Contrarians saying that we have a contrarian choice when we don't have a contrarian choice. So that's why certain bands we haven't done yet, and we're going to bring 5 for you today and kind of explain why briefly on these. So on that front, let's go to Marco. Marco, tell us what the first choice is of a band you won't see on the Contrarians.
So one band you're probably not going to see on the Contrarian version of our series, which is where we champion one band's album that is usually a dark horse album against the general consensus, is one that we talked about doing, which is The Doors. So I think Martin and I kind of discussed The Doors. I think Nick has an interesting opinion on The Doors, but Martin and I discussed The Doors, and when we were looking at like what are the greatest Doors album, what is the greatest Doors album, I think we really we had a slight disagreement, but I don't think either of them are really that contrarian. So Martin had mentioned The Debut as being probably the best Doors album. And like I can see his point. I think there's the classic songs on The Debut, like Break On Through is on there, The End is on there. Like those are 2 like iconic Doors songs. My favorite is Strange Days. I think there's also a lot of classics on Strange Days. I mean, half the album is great. Like there's Strange Days, People Are Strange is on there. When the Music's Over is on there. My Eyes Have Seen You, Moonlight Drive, right? So that's one that I would probably have picked, but I don't think any of those are really that contrarian. And in my heart, I couldn't have picked anything else. I have a crazy friend who at one point picked The Soft Parade as the best Doors album, but he wasn't a huge music fan. And I think that was his only Doors album that he owned, right? So we used to get into arguments. We used to get arguments all the time, but he liked The Soft Parade. There's a couple good things. I like Shaman Blues is on that one. But I mean, like really, a lot of the stuff that they did, especially a little bit later on, like LA Woman, for example, is kind of very hit and miss. It's very shaky. About half of it's really good. About half of it's kind of eh. And then, of course, there's the era of the Doors where, Jim Morrison had passed and they had put out a couple of albums like Other Voices, and that had a Tightrope Walk on it, Tightrope Ride, which was actually a good song. If you go and check it out, it's actually a decent song. But I think really you're looking at the first couple albums as the best. And I don't think that's contrarian. So we can't really do a contrarian episode on a band where we agree that, yeah, the general consensus is probably right with that one. So that's
Yeah,
The Doors
I agree. I think it's either going to be one of those 2 albums. It's certainly not going to be LA Woman or Morrison Hotel for that matter, right? And Soft Parade always got a lot of abuse because it was a pretty mellow album, right? I mean, they thought it was, I guess, too poppy or whatever. So I agree. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I like The Debut, but I'm not actually a big Doors fan. Like after The Debut, it's starts to just go downhill for me. And and really, I would say, for me, it's the strongest album, and it's a nice debut, and it kind of gives a good feel of what the band is about. But I personally don't want any more, so I wouldn't talk about it just because I don't really like them that much.
Okay. All right. So there you go. There's the first one. I'm going to give you the second one, Def Leppard. I really think Def Leppard, I've never for the life of me, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything other than High and Dry is the greatest Def Leppard album. It's their second album. You know, the old school fans like myself, you know, I will admit it. I'm one of those guys who loves High and Dry and very, very much likes On Through the Night. And even Pyromania, I've gotten a fondness for over the years. So I really quite enjoy the first three Def Leppard albums. And then it kind of starts going downhill pretty fast for me. Everybody knows my views kind of on, you know, the production of Mutt Lange and all that kind of stuff. But you know, we really can't do one because we kind of all agree that it's High and Dry. And like I say, the second part of this is it's truly the sober consensus choice, so much that I literally, like I say, throughout life, I don't think I've ever heard another example, you know, and another pick for favorite Def Leppard album, even though Pyromania was a massive seller, Diamond and all that stuff. You know, even if you were like a newer school Def Leppard fan, even those guys like High and Dry a lot. So it's this great album where Mutt Lange's starting to act a little bit like Mutt Lange, but it's a good, rousing album full of great riffs, quite a bit more professional than the debut. And then of course they changed quite a lot again for Pyromania. So there you go. That's why we can't do Def Leppard. And Nick, you've got a choice for us as well. Oh no, so yeah, let's just give me your 2 cents on the Def Leppard story.
I think you said it, you know, you said it great. I do think it's interesting that there does seem to be a bunch of bands where, you know, the first album is raw and doesn't quite have it, and they find that you know, they find they're more I'm trying to say this diplomatically, you know, like a professional team behind them of engineers and producers, and they keep that rawness, but they boost up the production value. And then, you know, a lot of bands after that, they start to go too far in that direction, become too commercialized. So I would agree with everything you said, and I think it's in general just like a really interesting thing that happens with a lot of bands.
Yeah,
Marco,
cool.
What do you think?
All right, Marco. Yeah,
I mean, like, I could be a real jerk and say Pyromania was the best selling. It went diamond, like I think Hysteria went diamond too, didn't it? I think both of those albums were massive hits for them in the 80s. And you know, a lot of times we get comments where people say things like, oh, album sales doesn't mean it's a good album, or critical consensus doesn't mean it's a good album, right? So why do you bring stuff like that up? Well, basically, because the idea is, you know, like, there's some things that are just objective opinions or objective statistics. Like, yeah, we have subjective opinions that this album's better regardless of critical consensus. So I try to bring things into it like, objectively, this album sold the most, but really in my heart, it's like, that I don't think that's going to go very far with the Def Leppard argument. And I think in the comments, I'm going to pay for it if I really try to argue with Martin's point. So, you know, for the sake of, you know, agreement with, you know, I do think Martin is probably right on with High and Dry. I do think picking Pyromania, even though it was a massive hit, and trying to argue that point based on album sales isn't going to fly very far. So I agree with Martin. He's probably right on with this pick.
All right. And Nick, you have a choice. Gee, I wonder what your choice is going to be here. Let us know what we aren't going to see on the Contrarians.
So Boston, the debut album by Boston, I think is just a funny little anecdote. My mom got this album for me when I was a kid, and she thought she was buying a greatest hits album. And I believed her for the longest time as a kid, because every song in here it sounds like it could be a massive hit on the radio, and tons of them were. You know, Foreplay Long Time is such a, it's hard for a, you know, a non-heavy band for me to create long songs. Like, I need a lot of that, you know, a lot of variety and a lot of sort of thumping aggression. But yeah, every song on this album is amazing, and it's I don't think it was ever really eclipsed by Boston. What do you, I don't know, what do you guys think? I assume everyone's in the same boat with me. I don't think
Marco?
I ever see anyone saying, you know.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'm not going to disagree with you because I don't really know anything about Boston. So no
Okay.
comment.
Cool. All right.
Fair enough.
Well, it's true. I mean, I think this is the one that people would pick. They would pick "Don't Look Back" certainly next, and then the likes of "Walk On" and "Corporate America" and what's
yeah.
the other one called? "Walk On," "Third Stage," right?
Yeah.
The band is long gaps in between. There's the magic's gone, the lineups are changing, all that kind of stuff. I mean, "Don't Look Back" and "Boston" go together, and "Don't Look Back" was a massive seller as well. But I think the first one is something like 27 million in the States, maybe alone, or 27 million worldwide, or something. Like it's this huge number. It's considered, I think, the greatest selling debut of all time. And like you say, it's just chock full of hits, and it's just a really well put together album. But the main point is that we can't nobody on the Contrarians is going to really pick a Contrarian choice here, and that's why we're not going to see Boston. So Marco, your second choice. Your second choice of our 5 choices.
Quick question. If an album sells 20 million, does that mean it's double diamond?
No, they only have a diamond designation. There's no such thing as double diamond.
Right. So I'll just, sorry for that deviation, but so the next band that I'm going to go with that you're not going to see on the Contrarians for kind of 2 reasons. For one reason, because I don't think the pick is very Contrarian, and for 2, because they don't have a huge output of albums, but I'm going to go with the Stooges. You might see Iggy Pop down the road. Iggy Pop's done a lot of albums. He's done a lot of stuff, his solo stuff. But with the Stooges, I mean, really, there's the 5 albums. There's the 2 that came out much later, I think in 2007 or 2013. But you had really, I think what we're looking at is the first 3 albums. And really, for me, they're actually quite close. I actually really like, probably I would go with Raw Power, which I think it would be the general consensus. But I think even the debut is strong, really strong. 1969, I love I Want to Be Your Dog. No Fun, Real Cool Time, and Not Right is great. Like I almost like every song off that one. Raw Power though, I mean, like that's probably, yeah, I would pick Raw Power. I think Search and Destroy, Give Me Danger, I Need Somebody, right? Raw Power's on there as well. Like I think that's probably the general consensus, and that's in my heart, that's probably their best album. I mean, for me, probably the weakest of the 3 would be the second album, but I really like the second album too, right? So that would be my pick. I don't think you're gonna see that one on the Contrarians, so that's why we're doing it here.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key choice is going to be Raw Power, the sober choice. It would be my choice, I think, by quite a bit actually. But a lot of people do love Funhouse, and a lot of people love the first one. The first one's kind of more well put together, and just better recorded. Funhouse is a kind of a crazy album, but the first one has that going for it, a little bit like Van Halen 1 versus Van Halen 2, actually, in a way, but also it's just got this great historic importance because it's a pretty heavy album for 1969, right? And then of course no one's really going to pick the last 2. It's almost like a whole different band. Well, it closely almost is, but the point is there's so much later, and you just can't compare. It's not the same era or whatever. But you do have it's 69, 70, and 73 on the first one. So it's going to be Raw Power, I think. So Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's nothing I could say here that would add any more to it. I also am a big fan of Raw Power. Yeah. I love Search and Destroy. It's a great song.
Yeah, cool. All right. So our last choice here of these 5 on this episode, we're calling 5 bands you won't see on the Contrarians, ... on the Contrarians. Our last one is Aerosmith. And the reason here is, as I was explaining to the guys before we went on air, I mean, even swear to, they have so many albums out, Aerosmith does, and a lot of them are great albums, and they've got roughly, I would say, 3 different eras to their lifespan. They've got the 70s, the 80s, and then everything else kind of thing. And depending on where you came in, you might find people who might pick Pump, maybe, or Permanent Vacation, but generally Pump, I would say. Probably nothing from after that. I've never heard anybody cite anything after that. But literally, honestly, the only album I've ever heard cited as the greatest Aerosmith album is Rocks from 1976. And that would be my choice as well. I mean, Toys in the Attic is close. Get Your Wings is pretty close. That I love Night in the Ruts, and I love Rock in a Hard Place too. But Rocks is the one picked far and away the top one. It was a big hit album at the time too. It literally, it's almost one of these perfect albums where it doesn't have any songs that even let it down. Not even the ballad, not even Last Child, but it's got a lot of absolute classics on it as well, like Rats in the Cellar and Sick as a Dog and Combination, stuff like that, Lickin' a Promise. So that's why. I mean, I think you'll hear in a second, but I don't think anybody's in a massive disagreement. And it, like I say, is literally the one that's always picked as the one, and we kind of agree on it. So there you go. Nick, any words on Rocks, Aerosmith?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying is true. Like I really like Shoot Me Now. I really like Permanent Vacation as well. Pump is another great album. Toys you're right, is very, very, very close. But I think I don't think we'll get much pushback on this to say Rocks is number one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Marco.
I think you're right. I think that's the album that you're going to see all over the place. I would think though that if you were gonna go contrarian, it wouldn't be very contrarian, because I think probably Get Your Wings is one of the ones that other people would kind of point to as maybe their favorite. They might argue that one, and that in itself, it's like, how can you be contrarian if you're going to pick the contrarian album that people would pick against Rocks? And even that would probably be disingenuous if one of us tried to pick that one and argue it against Rocks or whatever, right? So I think you're probably right on, but Get Your Wings is probably right up there.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, that's it. Let's wrap up. I mean, there you go. There's 5 bands you won't see on the Contrarians, ... on the Contrarians. And give us your comments. Let us know what you think of these choices of bands that we kind of have to disqualify for that. Marco brought up a really good point, though. I mean, pretty much every band is up for an edition one day of our worst album thing. Everybody has a worst album. That's kind of the point of that, right? But yeah, there's certain bands where we're not going to be contrarian, and there's such a clear choice. So let us know in the comments. That's it. We will wrap up and talk to you later. There's more coming down the pipe.